How's it going, guys? It's Matt here. Today I'm here with Champ, who is another Alpha Group founder. He's a bit of a visionary. He calls himself the NFT Steve Jobs, which I have to talk to you about because Steve Jobs is one of my guys, and I was like, dang, that's a bold statement to make right there. But I'll let him introduce himself. This is Champ.
What's going on, guys? As he said, Champ Crypto here, aka, as he said, the NFT Steve Jobs. That was, by the way, a totally off-the-cuff random moment. One of the things that just kind of stuck around. Steve Jobs is an idol of mine as well. No disrespect to the late and great Steve. But Matt, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, man, and I'm looking forward to this video.
Hell yeah. This is one of the first collabs I've done on my channel, so I'm excited to see how it goes.
As am I, man. What are we talking about today?
So today we're going to go over our tips and tricks on how to buy and sell NFTs for profit, right? So things that we've experienced in our journeys in the NFT space, and probably the most important things to know about when you're purchasing something, how to purchase it, when to sell it, stuff like that, that's helped us make profit over time in the short time we've been in the space.
Yeah, man, definitely have a couple things I want to touch on here today. I think that there are some pretty simple methodologies that the average NFT trader misses out on that can be really, really helpful when it comes to stacking ETH and generating profit in this market. So definitely looking forward to getting into it here. So the first thing that I'll talk about today is going to be my buying and selling strategy. Now, this is something that if you follow me on the channel, you may have heard me talk about before, but this is what I call my rule of 3. And this is a strategy that I use across the board for buying and selling NFTs to try and lock in profit 10 times out of 10 and make sure that I don't get left holding the bag, or if I do get left holding the bag, be in profit.
10 out of 10. Wow. 100% success rate.
Yeah, well, it's actually a little bit lower than that. And I want to emphasize the fact that, of course, this is not financial advice. The best NFT traders in the world take losses all the time. So, of course, take this with a grain of salt. But this is the strategy that I use in order to have the most success that I've seen in this market. And it goes like this. So anytime that I'm looking to enter an NFT trade, if I have the liquidity, and I understand that not everybody does, and I'll get into some other options here in just a second, I'm looking to buy NFTs in sets of 3, and I'll explain why. So let's say I'm entering a trade at 0.1 ETH, right? I'll use a lower cap NFT as an example here because that's going to be an easier trade for people to buy in 3s for your average trader who's starting out with a little bit lower amount of ETH. So I'll look to buy that in at least 3 for the following reason. That allows me then, if my investment thesis plays out, which hopefully it does, if I'm buying, to once that initial cost basis is covered, let's say it 2 to 3x's, right, move to close to a 0.3 floor price, which in my opinion, if you are making good trades in the NFT space, is very much attainable. People love trading NFTs because the upside is a lot larger than traditional markets. So I'd say it's pretty fair to expect a 2 to 3x return at minimum on a good NFT trade. So that means that once we hit that 2 to 3x mark, I can sell one of them to either reimburse my initial cost basis or at least come relatively close, right? Even reimburse about 2/3 of that initial cost basis. So now I have 2 left. Now with the second one of those, I'm going to also look to take profit fairly aggressively, but typically I'm selling that first one as early as possible once I get close to that 2 to 3x mark, still into volume if I can. And I'm looking to take profit on the second one, typically within the next 24 hours, but I'll be a little bit more patient. I'm willing to ride a little bit more up and down momentum to try and sell it at a better cost. But the reason why I like this strategy is because whether it goes up a little bit more to 0.4, 0.5, I can sell that and lock in a good amount of profit. Or even if we see the price begin to correct, I can still sell that and be in profit regardless. So I'm not only reimbursing my initial cost basis, but I am now in profit on this trade, and probably at a better percent of profit again than I would have been able to see with most traditional investment mediums. Now, my favorite part about this strategy is the fact that I now have one left over to hold. I know that there's always moon boys in the comments. I know that a lot of people enter NFTs because they want to see the wife change in gains, because they want to get that 10x, 100x, and this is a strategy that allows you to hold NFTs for that purpose responsibly. Because in my opinion, opportunity cost is extraordinarily real, something you should be aware of. And if you only buy one of any NFT, holding it for months on end to try and get that 100x is, due to that opportunity cost, an irresponsible move, my opinion. Again, not financial advice. But this allows you to then hold that moon bag to your heart's content while also remaining in profit, and essentially use whatever strategy you elect, whatever your risk tolerance is, to then take profit on that third one. Now, I know not everybody has the liquidity to get into the NFT trades that they want to get into in threes, which is why the second best option is to at least buy in twos, and it's a much simpler strategy. In that case, I'm looking to take profit at a 2x. If we get there, I am then playing with house money. Typically in that situation, I'll take that reimbursed initial cost basis and go invest it in another trade and hold that second one for quite a while, because in my mind, that's essentially a free NFT just by buying two instead of one. And if I am only able to afford one, I am always taking profit very aggressively, which I think, Matt, is something that you wanted to talk about today.
It is. It is. The saying I like to go with is nobody ever went broke taking profits, right? So if you were constantly taking even small wins, you're going to be up, right? You're covering your cost basis in Champ's strategy here. If you have threes, right, if you cover your cost basis with the first one, then you're riding the other two as long as you want to, and you're safe. You've already covered your investment. And if you take profit in the second one, no matter what happens with the third one, you already have profit. It's a similar situation with twos. If you have one, it's a very hard decision to make, right? If you get back to break even, or even if you're up a little bit, it's like, do I sell now and potentially risk being the next Bored Ape that I just sold at 1 ETH instead of riding it out to 100? It's a hard decision to make for anyone, myself included, Champ, and even the best traders. It's very hard to make a decision on just one NFT, whether you sell it for the profit or ride it out. I will say that the option one, which is selling it for profit, you're never going to lose money that way. If you consistently stack small wins, they do add up, and like Champ said, the opportunity cost putting that money elsewhere could yield better returns in the long term, or even in the short term. So having that method is not a bad choice at any moment. Don't be afraid. Don't feel like you're weak or soft or whatever that people might make you feel like in this space for selling out too early. If you're taking profits, congrats for you. You've already made a good decision because you're making money, right? And that's the ultimate goal behind all of these tips and tricks, and really just the space in general. I think most people's goal is to stack ETH and or just make money, return on their investment quicker than you can do in other areas. So I would say that's the general tip there, is that you can't go wrong with taking profits. Ultimately, like 98%, maybe even 99% of these projects that everyone's going to invest into will go to zero at some point. Most of these aren't going to survive. And so for that reason, if you just play probability, if you invest in 100 projects and you take profit on all of them while you have the chance to, you're going to be up. As opposed to holding them for maybe a year, most of them are likely going to be down or maybe even completely dead at that point. So that's a good choice. And then with the strategy of threes, like, you have the option to play both sides. You can take profit, be smart, be a savvy, safe investor, and also have your moon bag and have fun with it and be able to hold that NFT to see if it goes to 100 ETH like a Bored Ape, or 30 ETH like a Moonbirds or something like that. So that's why this strategy, I agree, is so valuable. I think anyone who's been in this space for a while like we have tends to gear towards this strategy because it works so well and it gives you so much flexibility in each trade you make, and helps you make better decisions because you have options.
People who bully you for selling just want you to hold their bags, guys. Dude, Diamond Hands is a myth. It's psyops by the whales. It's psyops by the whales who want you to hold their bags and they want to dump on you. Take profits, man. Just
dude, I have the other day, Arcade Inc.
Yeah.
So I got two at the mint. I bought two small lands, right? They were 0.25 to mint. I sold one. I listed it immediately for 0.65, and it sold the same day, like as I was out at night. So I immediately covered my whole cost basis. And the other one, I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this one? There was a big pump. It went up to like 1.2 ETH, and I sold. After I sold, I found that I sold. I'm like, this is 1.2 ETH of profit. Like, I got to take it. After I sold, I found out that Pranksy swept the floor. Like, fully swept the floor. Huge investment. And the floor went up to like 1.4 temporarily. So I was like, dang, dude, I just dumped my bags on Pranksy. I felt bad about it because I'm like, this is a bad sign. Like, I just sold at the absolute worst time to sell anything. When you have a whale like that comes in and sweeps the floor, usually it's a good sign. But, yeah, but it's actually back down again. It's down to 0.75. So those, that's like 0.5 profit. I locked in. I can buy back in lower now if I really want to, and that just goes to show, like, even when the whales are doing something there's a chance that you doing the opposite is actually going to be okay. And if you're making profit in the process, you're winning. You're absolutely winning no matter what.
Yeah, because people like, and that's another thing people don't understand is people like Pranksty or Gary Vee are these massive whale investors. Like, they can be reckless with their investments, and they don't care about if they buy at the top because they have 10-year and 20, however many year investment horizons. So you can't base your strategy and your reasoning off of when Gary Vee or Pranksty or these people are buying, because they don't care. They buy things 100 ETH over floor because they think that it's going to be the next money. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that money doesn't matter to them. So you have to be realistic about what your risk tolerance is and what your goals are. And again, like, I am of the belief that there's never anything wrong with taking profits. And totally candidly, anybody who is trying to FUD you for selling literally just wants you to hold their bags. They want to dump on you. Do you take profits? You'll never regret it. And the other piece is that, like I mentioned opportunity cost earlier, like, even if you sell at 5 and it peaks at 10, you still, it doesn't matter. Like, you have to have that confidence as an investor to go do it again, because replicating small wins is the most surefire way, I think, to make money in this space. People will tell you the opposite, you know, diamond hands. But if I had just held a Bored Ape this entire time, yeah, there are rare exceptions. Yuga Labs, yes. But most of these projects, no.
Yeah, but also, to that point, like, if you only have one Bored Ape and you're deciding whether or not to hold it through a 70, 80, 90 ETH gain, right? Like, at some point you're going to be like, I got to lock in. I got to take the money. I got to take the money. It's very unlikely if you minted a Bored Ape that you held it till today. It's unlikely because there's so much money on the table. How do you not take it? If you had 3 of them, then it's an easier discussion, right? So that's like the whole strategy wrapped up right there. It becomes way easier to be like, yeah, of course I'll sell one for 50 ETH. I made a ton of money, life-changing money, and I have 2 more, and I'm able to ride them out as long as I want. Like, that's the whole benefit of this strategy. I'd say it's the only surefire one I've seen work consistently through my entire time here.
But now you're getting to the secret strategy of 4, because I probably would have sold the 3rd one at like 10 ETH. So I need a 4.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But yeah, man, you make a good point, right? There's so many worse problems to have than selling early, because selling early, if you're in profit, means that you just made money, and there's always more opportunities. Like, we literally just saw moonbirds come out of the woodworks. Yeah, and that actually is a good transition to the 3rd point I wanted to bring up in today's video, which is a larger and a little bit higher level strategy, a thing to keep in mind that I think is important for newer NFT traders, which is what your overall objective should be when trading this market. You run an alpha group, I run an alpha group, and we contribute in large part to the culture around stacking as much ETH as possible by flipping NFTs, which is a very important step in the development of wealth creation via NFTs, right? Most people don't start out with super large sums of money to get into these big plays, to be able to buy mutants when they dip to 14 ETH and are now up to 32, to be able to buy doodles when they dip to 9 ETH and now made a move to like 17. But I think the piece that so many people forget is that the goal should always be to stack enough ETH via these flips, via the strategies that you and I spend time talking about on our YouTube channels. The reason why these alpha groups exist, to then park in these blue chip collections and in these new obvious plays, right? So that's kind of twofold. The first of which I'll talk about is parking in those blue chip collections. And this is something that seems obvious, but I feel like I have to talk about because it's a mentally challenging hurdle to overcome, right? Because the best time to buy a Doodles or to buy an Azuki or to buy a Mutant Ape Yacht Club is whenever it is the scariest to buy those things. Whenever I bought my Mutant at 4 ETH after they came down from like 8.5, everybody on Twitter was like, oh, they're not real apes. We told you these wouldn't make it. We knew they couldn't hold an 8 ETH floor. They're going to 0, this, that. And those are the times whenever you get the discounts on blue chip NFTs. And it's about having faith in those teams that have shown results before and being willing to buy them whenever they're down, whenever market conditions are a little bit rougher, whenever there's some FUD that you think is probably going to fizzle out. Of course, that doesn't apply across the board because we've been seeing Cool Cats go through a pretty rough
Dude, I was just going to say, I picked up Cool Cats at 7. I picked up 2 of them. Because I'm like, it's 50% off all-time high, and I bet that they will go past all-time high again at some point. But who knows?
But Dude, and maybe this video will look horrible in a year. I think there's a great chance that if we zoom out over the next year or two, that would be a great buy, honestly. But it's really hard to know. But the larger point that I'm trying to get to is that you want to make the obvious plays, right? I think people get really caught up in the minutia of like buying at the correct moment, right? For price action. I bought my mutant at like 4.4. They then went to 3.8 for like 3 months, and I was like, oh man, I bought the top. Like I'm down 0.7 ETH. They're at 32. It doesn't matter, right? Yep. If you had bought Azuki at 2, 3, 6, 10, 15, 20, it doesn't matter. You're in profit by a large amount of money. But obviously, most people don't have the liquidity to get into those plays, which is why I really want to impress upon the viewers and make people remember the objective is to use these strategies that we talk about to stay ready to make the obvious plays. If you had 3 ETH at your disposal from saving up making these flips, buying an Azuki right after mint was literally like the most obvious thing. Moonbirds were selling for 4.5 ETH on secondary right after mint. Well, actually they flew past it very rapidly, but maybe what, they were at like 6 for a while. The most obvious play, and it's almost like reverse psychology, because you're like, oh well, everyone's doing it, like, it, you know what I mean? It's just pumped right now. But sometimes whenever these plays are like the AAA true cream of the crop, like just obviously the best play ever, all you actually have to do is just keep money ready. I think people have a tendency to be really impatient in this market and almost not want to do things because they seem too simple. But all of the most lucrative trades I've ever made have been the most obvious and taken like the least research. The most difficult, time-intensive and research-intensive activity is those smaller plays.
Yeah.
These bigger ones, you just have to stay ready. But it can be kind of hard for newer people to really be able to tell which ones those are. So I think you were going to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to recap, yeah, you basically, the whole purpose is use the strategies, stack ETH, and then make your move on plays you think are going to do well. And a lot of people that are newer to the space, and even people that have been in for a while, myself included, might have a hard time figuring out like, well, which ones should I be making that big move on, right? Should I buy a Cool Cats? Should I buy a Mutant Ape? Should I buy a Moonbirds, which is like wildly unproven? It's brand new, right? It's like, you know, it's from an ecosystem that's just evolved from Proof Collective, right? Like it's a relatively new brand in the space. But I think one of the underlying, like the common denominator between all of those projects is that they have really good teams. And initially, Bored Apes, I would say, was a random team that wasn't necessarily well known. Nobody knew what they were capable of. It was early in the space. So at that time, it was like, yeah, well, betting on this team might not be the best move. And at that time, I think betting on teams wasn't even really a factor people considered that much. But I think where the space is now, with Moonbirds specifically, I think you're seeing that well-developed teams that are doxed, understand what they're doing, have a track record of being able to do what they're setting out to do in this Web3, system that they're building, are the ones you want to bet on. And I think other people are seeing that too, especially big money. Moonbirds doesn't go to 33 ETH floor and do 200 million in revenue in the first 24 hours, which is bigger than any other project to date, without a ton of serious buyers in that, in that ecosystem buying those things. It doesn't happen with retail investors. It doesn't happen with new or beginner investors that have a couple $100s to spend. Like, these are big players making big moves. And the reason those big players are making those moves is because they trust the team behind the project. They know that Kevin Rose is a entrepreneur who's been in Web3, has been on every magazine under the sun. Like, their team is robust. They have already proven that they can take a community with Proof Collective and grow it from whatever the mint price was. I want to say it was like around an ETH or so, all the way up to 100 ETH, right? One of the few collections that's ever made it to 100 ETH floor in a very short period of time. And it's because the people behind it have the repertoire to command that kind of, money. And when you have such big amounts of money flowing in, naturally you can expect that the small supply on some of these things is going to see the price rise at least somewhat over a decent amount of time. So I think the number one thing to look at when you're making those big moves, big plays, look at the team, do your research on the team, see how they've handled FUD in the past, see how they've handled controversy, see how they've handled issues with whatever they're building, see what they've done historically. A good example is Imaginary Ones right now. It's a huge project. It's got some of the most hype I've ever seen for any new NFT coming out. But looking at the team, how do we feel about the team? Are they capable of doing the things they say they're going to do, like building a game, like they're doing in real life and metaverse events, they're doing merchandise, like they're doing a lot of different things? Does their team have the experience in those areas, and do we think they're capable of delivering on those things they're setting out to do? If people feel strongly about that they can provide those things they're saying, I imagine the floor price will do well as a result, regardless of what the short-term actual utility looks like. But if they are mostly hype-driven and people don't believe in the team as much as someone like a Kevin Rose or a Yuga Labs or, you know, Animoca Brands or whatever, then I expect there will be less money flowing in, especially less big money flowing in, and people will be trying to flip it. And if everyone's trying to flip one thing, it's usually not going to go up in price. It's usually going to go down eventually. So that's the tip there, I would say, is when you're setting up for those big plays after you've stacked your ETH, after you've made your 3 purchases at once and gone in profit a couple times over again, and you have those funds to make a bigger play and make a bigger, longer term, investment. Look at the teams. If the team's good, I feel like more often than not, the project will do well as a result.
Yeah, Matt, and I think you're right. I think that especially for newer investors in the space, since there are projects that are really hyped that have good teams, and there are projects that are really hyped that do not have solid teams, it can be really difficult to make that distinction. And when you're doing your due diligence, as we all should before buying any projects, to be able to tell what type of individual is going to run a project like a true business, do things that are going to deliver value back to their holders. And it can just be really sort of challenging to navigate the space in that fashion and figure out who's who behind these projects. Which is why, right, it can be extraordinarily helpful to have guidance and be surrounded by people who are more knowledgeable in the space than you, especially when you're new.
And that's why, just like we run, 2 alpha groups are some of the best ways to get information and access to projects that have a lot of potential and actually know that they have potential, because you can have a community of people that are in the space that are actively doing the research as well. And so you're not just having to do your own due diligence and spend hours on end researching a team, understanding the value proposition that they offer, but all the members in your group are also working to do the same thing, right? You can all share that information, be like, hey, I heard this about this team, or I know this about this team, and this is why they could succeed, or this is what they're doing differently. And having that information is like paramount in the space right now. The ability to harness all of it into a central location and digest it in a way that's profitable is exactly what an alpha group is meant to do, right? It's meant to take a conglomerate of people with a ton of information that's all buzzing around on Twitter, Discord, AMAs, Reddit, whatever it is, and put it all into a place where it's like, hey, these are the tips we've gotten that lead us to believe that this project could do well, and so we're bullish on it for X reasons. Having that tip of information generally before the public does, and having it in a streamlined way, is the whole value that an alpha group tends to provide, in addition to getting things like whitelists where you can get pre-sale and early access to projects that are good. But those are generally the reasons why I say, like, joining a group, whether it's mine, whether it's Champs, or whether it's another group that you prefer, having that kind of community and information streamlined is like one of the best things I'd say you could do to help yourself find those good teams and ultimately find the good projects.
So important, man. Finding your clan in Web3, whether that's purchasing an alpha pass, whether you just get in a Discord group of people that are intelligent, that you can bounce ideas off on a daily basis, having a group of people that you trust and can help guide you to that information is immensely helpful whenever you're brand new. And I would quite honestly recommend that anybody who is new to the space seek out a community that suits them and will help them do just that. But yeah, Matt, I think we've gone over some really, really interesting stuff today. I'm hoping this will be enriching and helpful to anybody who watches it. And I appreciate you having me on here today, man.
Dude,
it was a good time.
Thanks for coming through. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think they're going to get a lot of value out of this. And if you guys did enjoy, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys all next time. We'll leave the Champs links in the description down below as well. Peace.
Peace.